Debt is one of the most emotionally charged topics in personal finance, and that emotional weight often gets in the way of thinking about it clearly. Some people avoid all debt as a matter of principle, which leads them to miss out on financial tools that, used correctly, can significantly expand what is possible in their lives. Others accumulate debt without fully understanding the mechanics of how it works against them over time, and end up paying far more than they borrowed for things they no longer own or value. The goal of this video is to cut through both of those extremes and give you a clear, functional understanding of what debt actually is, how different types of loans work, how interest compound against you, and the two most effective strategies for paying down debt systematically when you have it. Debt, at its most basic, is money you have borrowed that you are obligated to repay, typically with interest. Interest is the cost of borrowing. When a lender extends you a loan, they are giving up the use of that money for the duration of the loan period, and interest is the compensation they receive for doing so. From your perspective as the borrower, interest is the price you pay for access to money you do not currently have. Understanding interest, how it is calculated, and how it compounds over time is the single most important concept in understanding debt. Interest on loans is expressed as an annual percentage rate, commonly referred to as APR. The APR represents the yearly cost of borrowing as a percentage of the outstanding balance. A $10,000 loan at a 10% APR costs $1,000 in interest per year, assuming the balance stays constant. In practice, as you make payments and reduce the principal, the interest charges decrease accordingly. The APR is a standardized disclosure that allows you to compare the cost of different loans on an equal basis. When evaluating any loan product, comparing APRs is the most direct way to assess relative cost. Loans fall into two broad structural categories: installment loans and revolving credit. An installment loan has a fixed loan amount, a fixed repayment term, and a fixed or variable interest rate. You borrow a specific amount, agree to repay it over a set number of months or years through regular payments, and when the final payment is made, the account is closed. Mortgages, auto loans, personal loans, and student loans are all installment loans. Each monthly payment on an installment loan is split between interest and principal. In the early stages of a loan, a larger portion of each payment goes toward interest. As the balance decreases over time, the proportion shifts toward principal. This structure is called amortization, and it means that the total interest you pay is heavily front-loaded in the repayment schedule. Revolving credit works differently. A credit card is the most common form of revolving credit. You are approved for a credit limit. You can borrow up to that limit, make purchases, repay some or all of what you owe, and borrow again. There is no fixed end date and no fixed monthly payment amount beyond a required minimum. The balance can go up and down repeatedly over time. If you carry a balance from month to month, interest is charged on the outstanding amount. Credit card APRs are typically much higher than installment loan rates, often ranging from 20 to 30% or more, which makes carried credit card balances one of the most expensive forms of debt available to consumers. The mechanics of compound interest are what make high-interest debt so damaging over time. Simple interest is calculated only on the original principal. Compound interest is calculated on the principal plus any previously accrued interest that has been added to the balance. Most consumer debt compounds, which means interest generates more interest over time. On a credit card with a 22% APR and a $3,000 balance, if you make only the minimum payment each month, the combination of the high rate and the compounding means you will pay significantly more than $3,000 to retire that balance, and it will take years to do so. The minimum payment is designed to keep the account current while maximizing the total interest the issuer collects over the life of the balance. Paying only the minimum is the most expensive way to carry debt. Mortgage loans deserve specific mention because they are typically the largest debt most people ever take on and the one whose terms have the most long-term financial impact. A mortgage is a loan secured by real property, meaning the property serves as collateral. If you stop making payments, the lender has the legal right to foreclose, meaning take possession of the property. Mortgage terms in the United States are typically 15 or 30 years, with 30-year mortgages being the most common. The interest rate on a mortgage can be fixed, staying the same for the entire loan term, or adjustable, meaning it can change after an initial fixed period based on a benchmark rate. The total interest paid over the life of a 30-year mortgage is substantial. On a $250,000 loan at a 6% rate, the total interest paid over 30 years is approximately $290,000, meaning you pay roughly double the purchase price of the home in total. This is not an argument against mortgages, which can be a sound financial tool in the right circumstances, but it is an illustration of why the interest rate and loan term matter enormously. Student loans are another category that warrants specific attention because of their scale and their particular repayment dynamics. Federal student loans and private student loans operate differently in important ways. Federal loans offer income-driven repayment plans, deferment and forbearance options, and in some cases loan forgiveness programs. Private loans are contracts with private lenders and generally offer fewer protections and fewer flexible repayment options. Interest on student loans accrues during the repayment period and, for some loan types, during school as well. Understanding whether your student loans are subsidized, meaning the government covers interest during school, or unsubsidized, meaning interest accrues from disbursement, affects how much you ultimately owe at graduation relative to what you borrowed. Auto loans are installment loans secured by the vehicle. If you stop making payments, the lender can repossess the car. Auto loan terms typically range from 24 to 84 months. Longer terms produce lower monthly payments, but significantly more total interest paid. And they also create the risk of being underwater on the loan, meaning owing more than the car is worth, because vehicles depreciate rapidly in the first few years. A 5-year loan on a new vehicle at a reasonable rate is generally preferable to a 7-year loan, even if the monthly payment is higher, because the total cost is lower and the depreciation risk is reduced. Personal loans are unsecured installment loans, meaning there is no collateral securing the debt. Because the lender has no asset to recover if you default, personal loans carry higher interest rates than secured loans like mortgages or auto loans. They are used for a variety of purposes, including debt consolidation, home improvement, medical expenses, and major purchases. Personal loan rates vary significantly based on creditworthiness, ranging from roughly 6% for borrowers with excellent credit to 36% or higher for borrowers with poor credit. When you're carrying multiple debts simultaneously, whether credit card balances, student loans, auto loans, or others, you need a strategy for allocating your repayment dollars across them effectively. 2 strategies dominate this space and are genuinely useful for different psychological profiles. The debt avalanche method prioritizes debts by interest rate. You list all of your debts, identify the one with the highest interest rate, and direct every available dollar above the minimum payments on all other debts toward that highest rate debt. Once the highest rate debt is paid off, you take the amount you were paying on it and redirect it to the debt with the next highest rate, continuing until all debts are retired. The debt avalanche is mathematically optimal. By targeting the highest interest rate first, you minimize the total amount of interest paid across all debts and retire the debt in the shortest possible time given your repayment budget. If your goal is to spend the least money paying off debt, the avalanche is the correct method. The debt snowball method prioritizes debts by balance. You list all of your debts, identify the one with the smallest balance regardless of interest rate, and direct every available dollar above minimums toward that smallest balance. Once the smallest balance is paid off, you roll that payment into the next smallest balance, and so on. The debt snowball produces quick wins early in the process because small balances can be eliminated relatively fast. Research on behavior and debt repayment suggests that the psychological momentum generated by these early payoffs increases the likelihood of sustained commitment to the repayment plan. The snowball is not mathematically optimal in most cases, but for people who have struggled to maintain motivation through a long repayment process, the behavioral advantage can outweigh the additional interest cost. Choosing between the 2 methods depends on your situation and your own psychology. If the debts with the highest interest rates also have relatively small balances, the 2 methods may converge on a similar order anyway. If you have a high-rate debt with a very large balance that will take years to pay off before you see a payoff milestone, the avalanche requires sustained motivation through a long period without visible progress. If that is your situation and you know from experience that you need early wins to stay engaged, the snowball may produce better real-world outcomes for you, even if the total interest cost is slightly higher. The best repayment strategy is the one you will actually follow through on. Debt consolidation is a technique worth understanding as a distinct option. Consolidation involves taking multiple existing debts and combining them into a single new loan, ideally at a lower interest rate than the weighted average of the original debts. If you have several credit card balances at 20 to 25% APR and you qualify for a personal loan at 12%, consolidating those balances into the personal loan reduces your interest cost and simplifies your repayment to a single monthly payment. The risk of consolidation is that it can create a false sense of progress. The debt has not decreased. It has been restructured. People who consolidate credit card debt and then continue using the cards can end up with both the consolidation loan and new credit card balances, which is a worse position than the one they started from. Consolidation is a useful tool, but only effective when paired with a behavioral change in how credit is used going forward. The overarching principle governing all debt decisions is that debt is a tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on how it is used. Debt used to purchase appreciating assets or to invest in education or income-generating capacity, managed at reasonable interest rates and repaid on a clear schedule, can be a rational part of a sound financial plan. Debt used to fund consumption at high interest rates, maintained through minimum payments and allowed to compound indefinitely, is one of the most effective wealth-destroying forces in personal finance. The difference between those two outcomes is not primarily about income. It is about understanding exactly how debt works and making deliberate decisions based on that understanding.